Good evening everybody and welcome back to the Retro Review. My name is Richard Brooks, aka the Blue-Eyed Geek, and this week we're going to be looking at something more along the lines of horror. Now I know Halloween has come and gone, but tonight I want to talk to you about one of my favourite horror films of all time, and one of the most original horror films of the 1980s, and that is Clive Barker's 1987 horror film Hellraiser, which I have here on Region 2 box set in limited edition puzzle box from Anchor Bay. I also hold the film in Region 1 20th Anniversary Edition import. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I have a part-time job as a cleaner in my local comprehensive school which I attended in my youth. Now, one of the classrooms I have to clean is my old geography room. Now, the geography room itself holds a tenuous link with tonight's film, in that it was the first place in which I viewed Hellraiser. On the last day of term, we were allowed to watch films, and one of my friends put on Hellraiser very sneakily behind our teachers' backs, and decided that we'd skip through all the boring dialogue bits and just watch all the guts and gore. Now, this overload of imagery at 12 years old was too much for me and disturbed me, giving me nightmares for years to come. And it was only 10 years ago that when I saw the film for the first time in its entire form, albeit with my fingers, that I fell in love with it. Hellraiser is one of the most original horror films of the 1980s and stands apart from the hack and slash films of that decade as one of the most rich, invigorating and inventive films of that period. The film itself is based on the novella The Hellbound Heart, written by Clive Barker. Barker himself found fame in the 1980s with stories from his short story collection The Books of Blood. He'd also later written books such as Damnation Game and Weave World. A lot of his stories in the 80s were beginning to be turned into films. The 1985 film Underworld, aka Transmutations, and the 1986 horror film Rawhead Rex were abominations of his works. And he decided that if he was going to do a film based on one of his books, if he was going to make his directorial debut, he would take one of his lesser-known stories and do it right. Now, Clive Barker had directed before in his limited theatre company, The Dog Company, where he directed plays such as The History of the Devil, Day of the Dog, and Frankenstein in Love. He'd also directed two short films, Salome and The Forbidden. The Forbidden featuring imagery and themes similar to Hellraiser. Now, as I said, Hellraiser is based on his 1987 novella The Hellbound Heart. He'd adapted this into screenplay form and with some of his original illustrations had gone to Hollywood to seek financing. Not many people were interested, especially not New Line, who were known at the time for their independent horror movies and had backed the Nightmare on Elm Street series. However, Roger Corman's New World Pictures had seen potential in the film series and had decided to back it. So Barker himself, going back to England, armed with a small cast and crew, shot the film in Cricklewood and in a house in London. The film itself concerns a gentleman by the name of Frank Cotton. Although he's no gentleman, he likes to taste every single pleasure in the world and has fucked and experienced half the world already when he finds himself in Morocco. He's looking for the ultimate thrill ride and is advised to find Le Marchand's puzzle box. It's a puzzle box which was devised by a 15th century Frenchman. So Frank buys it, believing that it will open the gateways to the ultimate experience and pleasure. He takes it back home and decides to solve it. Unfortunately, curiosity has always killed the cat, and he brings forth Cenobites from hell, whose version of pleasure is pain, and decide to rip his soul apart and take him to hell to experience such pleasures. Some unspecified time later, Frank's younger brother Larry, his wife Julia, and daughter Kirsty move into the house, unaware of the nightmare that has gone on before. One day, while moving the furniture into the family home, Larry cuts his hand on a nail. It drips blood everywhere in the attic, and in one of the most spectacular scenes in the film, Frank is resurrected from hell, although be it in a half-made gelatinous skeletal form. Now, unbeknownst to Larry, Frank's brother, his wife Julia had an affair with Frank and still lusts after him. This, of course, leads Julia, one day up to the attic where she hears strange noises, is confronted with the horrific form of Frank's unmade self. Still in love with Frank, Frank convinces her to bring him victims in the attic so he can remake his body by draining their blood. Julia naively believes that Frank wants to pick up the relationship from where it left off. All Frank wants to do is escape the clutches of the Cenobites, make himself human again, and continue his lustful rampage through the world. Larry's daughter Kirsty one day happens upon the attic and Frank draining one of his victims. Stealing the puzzle box, she runs off to the nearest hospital where she collapses. Upon awakening in hospital, she herself solves the puzzle box and calls forth the Cenobites. The Cenobites themselves have a rule. You have the desire to open the puzzle box, and you must come with them to hell and taste their pleasures, as one of the Cenobites says in a line from the film. Kirsty, being the wily one, makes a deal with them and decides to lead them back to the house where she will exchange Frank's soul for her own. I won't tell you what happens in the rest of the film, but needless to say, the final 20 minutes is a roller coaster ride of thrills, guts, scores, and surprises. And it has a very haunting end of the film, which kind of brings the whole thing full circle. Now, as I said, it was filmed in London at Cricklewood Studios, directed and written by Clive Barker, photographed by the great Robin Vidgeon, who had worked on some of the Hammer horror films and Alfred Hitchcock's Presents series. The film had special effects by Image Animation, who, in their first solo venture, they're best known for the work on Black Hawk Down. They previously worked on films such as Highlander, Return of the Jedi, and Dark Crystal, and also Ken Russell's Lair of the White Worm. Hellraiser was their first outing into visual effects, and they excelled themselves with their realistic, anatomically correct gore, especially in the skinned Frank makeup, which was constantly dripping with goo and gore. It is also notable for the first appearance of Pinhead, one of modern horror's great icons. Portrayed by Doug Bradley, Doug was offered the role of Pinhead, but also one of the roles of the Removal Men. Now, Doug had acted in the Dog Theatre Company, which was run by Clive Barker, and decided that if he wanted to be on screen for the first time, he wanted to be recognisable, but also found himself in a dilemma because the Pinhead role was much more of a meteor role. And he was quite right, as Pinhead became the icon of the film itself and one of the most talked about points of the film. The imagery of a demon with pins in its head is quite intoxicating. And funny enough, he became a sex symbol. He was splattered all over the posters and the merchandising, and became, as I said, one of the great horror icons of the modern era. Doug Bradley himself, I have an autograph of. Unfortunately, it's addressed to my father. Long story there. My father's a priest, and one of the parishioners in his parish is an actor. And he was doing Pumpkinhead 3 in Romania with Doug Bradley, and I asked if he could get him Doug's autograph. Although Doug mistakenly believed it was for my father and had written him a letter and signed a photograph saying, "To Peter, see you in hell." I think it's really cool that there was a vicar who was Pinhead's fan. We do laugh about it, although I don't think my father was very best pleased. Who can blame him, man of God, being a Pinhead fan? Don't want to get the wrong impression, do we? The film Hellraiser itself, going back to the topic at hand, excuse me while I scratch my ear and my nose. The film Hellraiser itself has a haunting score by Christopher Young, best known for his work on Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies and on Barry Levinson's film Bandits. The music itself is designed to be chamber piece music and also to be the background soundtrack to the horrors of hell. And it's probably one of the most beautiful horror scores next to John Carpenter's synth score for Halloween. Now, the film stars Andrew Robinson in the role of Larry. Most viewers will recognise him as the Scorpio Killer in Dirty Harry. He also stars Claire Higgins in the role of the adulterous, traitorous wife, Julia. Some people will recognise her as Ma Costa in the adaptation of Philip Pullman's Golden Compass. It also stars in her first role Ashley Lawrence as Kirsty. She herself has gone on to be a scream queen herself. Now, the film, when it was released, became a box office hit and over the years has become a cult item amongst horror fans. The film spawned 8 sequels, and there's also talk of a remake. Now, the film sequels have the unfortunate advantage of varying in taste. The second one is good, the third one is alright, the fourth one onwards are terrible. They were all shoddily remade by the Weinstein brothers, who acquired the rights from Roger Corman's studio when it went under. Now, they decided that if they want to keep the franchise rights to Hellraiser, to make a remake down the line, which is all the rage at the moment, they were just going to keep on knocking off just sequels. And they've done it again recently. They're making Hellraiser Revelation so they can keep the rights. And at the moment, the remake is going ahead without Doug Bradley, without Pinhead, which a lot of horror fans are dismayed at, because a lot of people believe that Pinhead, without Clive Barker's involvement, is the thing that ties the Hellraiser universe together. Now, the director of My Bloody Valentine 3D is lynched to direct the Hellraiser remake, although I do believe that if Hammer Horror get their act together, they could buy the rights to the Hellraiser series off the Weinstein brothers. And if they employed writer-director Tom Six, who did The Human Centipede, I reckon that would be a really good remake. Now, as I mentioned, Hellraiser itself I have in various versions. The American Region 1 version is the censored version and contains a few more interviews than the Anchor Bay original release. Well, the Anchor Bay release contains the uncensored version as well as the 2 sequels, Hellraiser 2 and 3. Now, before I end tonight, I just want to say thank you to everybody out there who supported me and gave me good reviews for last week's show. At the end of this show as well, I'll be giving you the web address and my email address. If you're interested in getting in touch with me and finding out more about tonight's show, please do. The next week I'll be looking at Flash Gordon from 1980 in tribute to the late producer Dino De Laurentiis, who died last week. Now, in the meantime, if you don't mind, I've got to go and solve a puzzle. Isn't that right, Pinhead?